I thought it would be interesting to just tell you a bit of brief background about me and my journey to put it in perspective what I'm about to talk about the online community. So I was diagnosed in 2011 after a 2-week stay in hospital with what turned out to be cellulitis, a pretty violent and painful infection. At one point they were talking about sepsis and they were talking about amputation, but I did leave hospital 2 weeks later with lymphedema. So that, I'm sure, is no surprise to any of you who have treated people with cellulitis before. Can I have a quick show of hands? Anyone experienced patients with cellulitis? The majority. And lymphedema patients? Practically everybody. Okay, great, thank you. So totally relevant that you stayed till the end, thank you. So my left leg became 56% bigger than the right leg at the time of diagnosis, and it's pretty life-changing, as I'm sure many of your patients will tell you, not just physically, but from an emotional and well-being perspective as well, which I'm going to touch on shortly. I was diagnosed with very little information. It was very matter of fact. You've got an incurable chronic disease, nip down to the storeroom and get some stockings on your way out. That kind of approach. And at the age of 40, that was a bit of a life-changing moment for me. So I went to my GP to see if they could, or he at the time, could point me in the right direction. And bearing in mind that it was 13 years ago, the GP didn't know where to send me for help. Sadly, I hear that's still going on today. So there's still a lot of education that's needed. It was like wading through treacle in thick fog. And lymphedema, as most chronic diseases, I can imagine, have some very highs and some very lows, and the lows kick in very, very quickly. So some of my battles, which through talking to other people within the lymphedema community, I'm not alone, included the acceptance of this thing's now with me for the rest of my life. It's not going away. Doesn't sound much. I'm going to kick in the vanity card here, but literally all of my suits, all of my trousers, my jeans, my shoes had to go to charity. And I had to start again. I was doing appraisals for my team in clown-like jeans. From a professional shirt tie suit environment, it was quite life-changing. I didn't have a shirt as colourful as you at the back there, sir, but you tried to disguise it, but unfortunately you had to buy either the baggiest linen shirt, trousers, or just wear shorts, which I didn't do. Physical challenges, not just on the affected limb, but as Ellie will know, recently I had to have a hip replacement on my right side because of the wear and tear on the opposite side. I've had gait issues on the right. It has a knock-on effect. And all of that pain is, it's the biggest thing, isn't it? It doesn't discriminate and it's all-consuming. With the physical side comes the mental well-being. The challenge of dealing with this, of facing your friends and family and going out in public to show the leg, to show the limb. I didn't wear shorts for 10 years until my very first charity golf day, where one of my other lymphy mates said, right, Matt, it's a glorious day, why aren't you in shorts? So I'm a bit shy, I'm a bit nervous. He said, you've written a book, you've created a website, wear some bloody shorts. So I promised him I would, and on the hottest day of that year, I went to see my therapist in shorts, and it was quite liberating. And did people stop and stare? Of course they didn't. But the mental barrier of overcoming that was huge. And self-confidence, which kind of dovetails with that, really. You hide away, you don't want to show it to the public, you don't want the questions. Even by the pool on holiday, I was wearing linen trousers, for goodness sake. And I felt alone. It's a lonely environment. Lymphedema, weirdly, apparently, BLS will say there's 450,000 people in the UK with lymphedema. Where are they? And I'll come on to that shortly. So I did what most blokes do and buried my head in the sand. And it wasn't until my wife decided to pull me by the neck and pull me out of the sand that I was able to move forward and start doing some good in this community, or I'd like to think so anyway. So where are these 450,000 people within the lymphedema community? Well, I bump into maybe one or two when I go and see my therapist at St George's in London. and we stare at each other across the waiting room and you don't know whether to introduce yourself, we don't know to say hi. Or there's a lady who I walk past in Waitrose who's got an arm sleeve on, and I think, should I go and talk to her? Should I show her my ankle and say, yeah, I got one of those as well? So do we, at our local clinics, ask our therapists how busy you are, we know, just to act as a little bit of a cupid? And perhaps say, actually, Matt, I know this other guy called Colin, for want of a better word, who also plays golf. Why don't you connect? I know GDPR is a typical thing, but I'm sure we all know, and I know I'll use this word once, Ellie, patients, people with lymphedema that can unite and come together and create a buddy or support system. Local support groups were a thing way back. COVID, I think, dare say, has put a stop to many of these groups coming together, certainly within the lymphedema world. So what I've tried to do is create some ad hoc get-togethers, meetups over a cup of coffee in the local hotel, or we've now moved to virtual meetups where I act as Cupid, introduce people from Bristol together and then let them crack on. So patient association conferences were another big thing. And I remember attending back in, I think it was 2015-16, the LSM conference in London. There's about 100 people there. Show of hands, how many blokes do you think there were out of 100 people? More than 10? More than 5? 1? 2? There were 3. 3%. Now I think that's quite representative actually of the male voice in any chronic illness, that we don't tend to talk about it. We do bury our heads in the sand. But to go to an event like that with the flagship patient association, the LSN, and just see 2 other fellas there was a bit demoralising, to be fair. But do people want to be seen? I hid away for 4 years. I didn't want to meet other people. You have to be in the right mindset. You have to be ready to share. And when you do, it's finding the community. It's finding that buddy, that support system. And people who don't want to be seen can also find that community via social media as an avatar or a made-up name. So they have that anonymity. They can join online support groups, again anonymously. So they don't have to show their true self. They can sit in the background and just watch and read and learn what's going on an online community. There are a number of people, as we know, and I've spoken to a few district nurses over the last couple of days, where mobility is a problem and people can't leave the house. And a number of them have access to either an Apple phone or a computer or a laptop or a tablet to join these online groups. And in some cases, people I've spoken to, these are a kind of, I know it sounds dramatic, life-changing moments where they've hooked up with somebody who truly understands what they're going through. I don't expect to read the numbers. How many of you are on Facebook? How many of you are on Instagram? Okay, dare I say it, and you're going to lynch me for this, those on Instagram are of a certain younger age than those on Facebook. There's a message here. I'm not going to insult you deliberately, but my parents love Facebook. If I could get my teenage daughter anywhere at Facebook, it would be a miracle. She's on TikTok, she's on Instagram. I'm not allowed to call it Insta. She told me off for that, so it's not cool, Dad. It's Instagram. But what we've got in the world of lymphedema, as we know, is a certain age group that perhaps have lymphedema due to cancer treatment. My mum's generation, perhaps, the 60 plus, perhaps. And then we've got the younger generation. I don't know if you visited the job stand, but there's an image of 6 foot tall Didi who won bronze at the Olympics, Paralympics a couple of weeks ago. We've got the Medi models, all of a certain age. The young people are coming through, and we do have lymphedema too. And I don't know why I'm saying I'm young, I'm 53, but I'm going to hang on to that for a minute. So what's the relevance of this slide? Well, social media, as I said, is a place where you can find help and not be visual, not declare who you are. And you can see on the screen there that the LSM have done a fantastic job with over 11,000 followers on Facebook, but only 815 on Instagram. It's kind of typical of the LSN demographic. Legs Matter in second place, BLS, which also have a good representation in Instagram. And you can see them. I'm not going to dwell, but you can see that the Facebook historically has been the larger catchment platform, but Instagram has a role to play, certainly for the younger generation. And the younger generation, the top chart is for Facebook. You can see the first one is 18 to 24s, so you can see the Instagram one underneath. 18 to 24s and 23 to 34 is by far the largest share of the social media platforms. So should we be encouraging more activity on the likes of Instagram? And that's where our influencers like Dee, like some of the Medi models come in, because they have huge followings. And what they do is they raise awareness of lymphedema in the younger generations and make it more accessible for people to talk about it. So hopefully the younger generation will be more comfortable, be it online, communicating with others in the way that they do, rather than us older generations who stick their head in the sand and don't talk to anyone about it. But the important thing is to look at the split between Instagram and Facebook. But there are pros and cons. As we all know, we've all used social media platforms. When I was in that sort of downward spiral after diagnosis, I became desperate to find solutions. And Amazon and Google were my go-to places, and the amount of money I spent trying to find products, aids, clothes, shoes online, rather than go to a shop and try them on and find that it didn't fit or it didn't work, and I sent it back. There's people out there, unscrupulous people, selling stuff that perhaps isn't compliant, isn't regulated, is cheap, ineffective, and could, as I've found out by my therapist, and you're nodding, Carol Ann, do more harm than good by trying something perhaps that the therapist or specialist clinician has advised you to use. And of course, we all know that the desperate and the vulnerable are played on and taken advantage of. So be wary of the scam and scammers. 1 in 4 people who reported losing money to fraud said it started on social media. So there's your con. But there are pros. There are social groups, I'm sure we know them, that you can join in the lymphedema community for feedback, comments, perhaps on particular products. Comfy Wave has gone bananas and is getting a lot of social media activity and a lot of people recommending it to others. Experiences of certain clinics. Where do I go to for help? And the reply could be, well, Derby have a lymphedema clinic. Go and check them out, or St George's. So it's a useful communication tool to pass on tips and point people in the right direction. And as I said earlier, it gives you the opportunity for people to meet people with lymphedema who truly understand what they're going through. You know, I've bored my wife to tears in the early years, telling her how difficult it was and how heavy my leg was. At that time, it was 6 litres bigger than the other one. Actually, the partners go through hell listening to us, and I think sometimes if you're talking to another person with the same condition, they truly get and understand. And if you're having a bad day, you can pick up the phone to them. But also online, as I touched on, there are some really inspirational and dynamic influencers within the lymphedema community. And the reason I'm sharing these with you is for those people who are in that slump, are coming to terms with diagnosis. There is no light at the end of the tunnel in their eyes. And I can talk from experience, but actually there is. There are people out there that have lived with lymphedema and come out the other side and done some real positive things to help the community. And they are quite inspirational to people who are going through that tough time. And I'll touch on that in a second. So be part of the community, whether you want to declare your person, your real life person, or be an avatar. Be part of that community, because there's no way that one should feel alone with lymphedema. And if you think about the patients and the people you deal with, either a daily, weekly, or 6-monthly basis with lymphedema, I bet you can think of at least half a dozen that would benefit from knowing where to find this help. So I'm about to touch on that now. So Nicole, one of the Medi models, absolutely fabulous. Facebook and Instagram, you can see the followers. She's got a significant number of followers, and she's all about showing upper limb and lower limb in all of its glory, wearing the funky colours that Medi produce, and not being ashamed to show it. And what she's done is normalise lymphedema by turning the garments into a fashion accessory and as part of an outfit. Incredible lady. Amy and Amanda. Amy, her leg was about 200% bigger than the other. She wrote a book called Drop the Skirt. She's got the Ninjas Fighting Lymphedema in the States, and she has a huge following on social media. Amanda Sobey ended up being a model and a weightlifter, but still with lymphedema in her leg. These are amazing stories, and you can see by the number of followers that they have that they're very popular. And then we move on to the newcomers, the youngsters. And look at the shift between Facebook followers and Instagram followers. It's significant. Now, Anna from Italy, she's almost a model caliber, and she wears her compression for everybody to see. Dee Dee, we've touched on, jobs to model, just graduated from law and has just won bronze in the Paralympics. What a role model. And more to follow. So these are people that are relatable, and you'll notice there that they're all women, and most of them begin with A. So I'm going to change my name to Annabelle Hazledine and join this crew. But what I do on a Sunday is entirely up to me. So us fellas, we need to get up and at it, and that's what I'm trying to do with Lymphoedema United. And as I said earlier, look at the age. Let's encourage people of the younger generation to get online and start following. Now, the other thing, as we touched on earlier, the face-to-face support groups, which have sadly closed or declined post-COVID, have shifted online. And there's some fabulous ones that I'm going to show you. And I do believe this presentation will be made available after today. But on my website are all these contacts, all these people. So if you have any patients, again, sorry, Ellie, people with lymphedema that you want to point in this direction, I can signpost them to any of these people, any of these groups. It's a great community and would welcome them to be part of it. But the online support groups, as I said earlier, you can be completely anonymous through an avatar, or you can be simply yourself. And if you search lymphedema support groups on Facebook, a whole raft will come up. These are the ones I recommend. So there's Lymphoedema Support Group with 12,000 members, and in an international setting with the, it's spelt wrong, isn't it? They've missed out the O, but that's correct in America, 8,000 members and lymphedema. Private groups where you have to go through a vetting system, almost a little questionnaire before they accept you as a member, include Thriving with Lymphedema, Gainer Leach, I'm sure you're familiar with LWO, Craig Solomon with Lymphoedema UK, LSN's Health Unlocked, and one I'm going to touch on in a second in a bit more detail, and he hates the name of this, is Lymphoedema Sufferers UK, with 4,700 members. And that's run by a guy called Tom Nielsen, who shared his story on my website. That's the logo to look out for. This is a great one to point your clients, patients to. And that's Tom, and Tom shares his story both in my second book and on my website. Fabulous guy. So going back to the title of the presentation, can individuals that require care benefit from the online community? Well, I've hoped so far you've heard a show of hands to say, yes, it does, would be great, or a no, two, come on. I know it's 3 o'clock, great. So if there are people that you can think of that will benefit, do point them in the right direction. Here's an anonymous member who has shared their quote, to seek help from this particular support group. And for those at the back who can't read it, hi, I think I have stage 1 or 2 lymphedema. No clinic will take my doctor's referral because I'm not pitting or weeping. I've read that it can be turned around at this stage, but I don't have any information on how to do that, and no access to the clinic, who will only see me once it gets really bad, after the horse is bolted, right? But if I shake my legs, it's like only the insides are swollen, but the outsides are smooth and normal. By the evening, I can't even bend my legs other than exercise, compression, right? So we know to catch lymphedema early is the best thing you can possibly do. Get in the right compression and maintain it at that size. You've got people jumping on there saying, I won't get a referral until it gets too bad. Now, on this one, there were probably 26, 30 comments of help underneath, which I wasn't going to put on the screen. Here's another example. I'm looking for help. For a year now, I've been battling with my GP for a referral to the lymph clinic in Derby. He referred me to Myton Hospice. Why? And yes, it was refused as I don't have lymph as a result of cancer. I'm 50 and was diagnosed at 13, so I'm not a newbie to this. I haven't had compression garments for well over a year, and I'm desperate for both legs and arms. Quite horrific. Hi everyone. I have a really intense pain in this part of my leg. Anyone with the same experience? How to cure this, please? It's so tiring. Now, I can see that there are people who in this room who could help with these solutions or provide solutions to these problems. Hi, does this look like it could be cellulitis? Becky, you're probably the first person as you're closest to see whether that's the case or not. If it's in both legs, probably not. But if it's in the one and it's hot and it's tender and it's sore, and it feels like acid's being poured down it, then probably yes. So let's go recap on that. Can individuals require care benefit from the online community? It's a resounding yes from the reasons that you've seen. And interestingly, some of these support groups online have got therapists and clinicians and healthcare professionals who join, and they stay very, very quiet until they see something like that cellulitis issue, and then they jump on and put a very generic comment to signpost that person to help. So I know you're very, very busy, but if you did want to join a support group online and add words of wisdom at the appropriate time, I'm sure the community would be very welcomed by that. So in summary, people living with lymphedema can feel alone, can feel isolated, especially those who have mobility issues. When accessing trusted sources, social media can educate, empower, and unite people. And the bottom line is, with whatever chronic condition you have, no one should feel alone. There is somebody out there going through the same situation. And before I move on to the next point, I'll just jump on that by saying that I was doing some virtual meetups earlier this year, and in the Norwich area, there was about 8 people who joined virtually. There was a gentleman in a wheelchair. He couldn't wear shoes, or he hasn't been able to wear shoes for about 8 years. He couldn't walk across his lounge. He was in a dire situation. He'd bored his wife to tears and he needed help. And he said to me during that Teams call, if you find anyone in a wheelchair that has mobility issues with lymphedema, can you please introduce me? I kid you not, 24 hours later I was doing my Bristol one and there was a lady in exactly the same situation. So with their permission, GDPR compliant, I introduced them to each other and they've been support buddies ever since. It only takes one person, and it doesn't have to be the person round the corner for coffee. And I'm sure that's exactly the same with the leg clubs, Ellie. As soon as you relate to somebody and you get a bond with somebody, that person becomes your support, your friend, when you're having a bad day. But there's always a little note of caution. Do be wary of the scammers. The Americans are terrible at this. They allow anyone on their support sites to sell products that aren't perhaps regulated. If you do have any vulnerable or desperate people, just bring that to their attention. Don't be a sucker like me, and wasted so much money on stuff that didn't work. And just finally, how are we doing for time?
You're all right.
We're good. Minutes, yeah. At least 10 minutes. All right. So song and dance time then. What we're trying to do here is unite the lymphedema community. And by collaborating with Ellie and the Lindsay Leg Club, the BLS, the ILF, the LSN, the list goes on, we're all working together for the greater good of the people with lymphedema. You do an amazing job, and it's an opportunity for me to thank you for the care, the dedication, and the love and the listening that you give us guys and girls with lymphedema. It's not an easy job, but on occasions, you know, we do need to offload, and don't forget to ask them how they really are. How are you? Yes, I'm fine is my stock answer, but how are you really? And I know we often have a relationship for years and years and years because of the fact it's chronic. So make that count, and you become, more than you realise, you become a friend to us, an emotional support. So I just want, on behalf of the community I know, is to say thank you to everything that you do to support us. And I'll wrap it up there. I have got some more slides, Ellie, but let's wrap it up on that one. But can I just give you all a round of applause for what you do, please?